to the Open to Hope show. I'm your host, Dr. Gloria Horsley, with my daughter and co-host,
Dr. Heidi Horsley.
Well, Heidi, we have an amazing guest today, somebody who has survived a tremendous amount of trauma. And we're going to be talking today about finding hope after multiple deaths. And we're going to be talking to Jill Kraft Thompson, and then we're going to have trauma expert Richard Beck come in and talk about dealing with trauma. Well, Jill, welcome to our show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
Hi,
my
Jill.
goodness.
Hi.
Heidi and I are just amazed with the fact that you're up and running and you're
Absolutely.
here and you've come all the way from, where do you live?
Idaho. McCall, Idaho.
McCall, Idaho, to be on the show with us. Really, really
are-
fantastic.
When I met you today, all I could say was wow. And you've been on our radio show too, and you are an absolute inspiration. You are a lifeline out there for anyone who's listening, that you can not only survive but find hope again. Jill has rebuilt her life after losing the 5 people she loved the most. Her 2 sons, Ben and Sam, her husband, her mother, and her niece. And she's also the author of a book, and I know I'm getting ahead of
That's
myself,
right.
but I love it.
That's
Called
right.
Finding Jill.
Finding Jill. It's a fabulous book. And it is how I rebuilt my life after losing the 5 people I loved the most.
And I love the pictures on the front.
Yep, the pictures
Thank
of your
you.
family, pictures
They're beautiful, huh?
Yep, your mom, beautiful, your husband, and your 2 kids and your niece, right?
Yeah.
Wow. Well, Jill, give us a little backstory. Where were you when this happened, and what happened?
My husband was transferred with Micron Technology out to Italy, Avezzano, Italy, to be exact. It's very central, about an hour and a half east of Rome. And my son, oldest son, Benjamin, was attending 1st grade there at a Catholic school called Sacra Cuore. My little guy, Sammy, was going to preschool there. My mother and my sister and my niece came over for their spring break, and we were able to spend a week around that area. We decided to take a week trip up to Venice, which is about 7 hours away, and then down to Florence, making a big loop back to home before they had to head back to the States. When we left Venice, just outside of Bologna, Italy, a semi-truck was clipped by a U.S. Army truck and lost control. At that time, the median was too high for my husband Bart to see it, and so when the emergency turnaround came about, the semi whipped into there, and Bart had maybe a second to react, and he turned the wheel and the brunt towards himself, and I believe that's what saved my sister and I.
Wow. And how many years ago was this?
It was 13 years ago.
Wow, 13 years ago. In the world of grief and loss, that's not a long time,
Especially
No, it really isn't.
your whole family is gone.
Yeah.
And it is such a miracle that you're here today.
Thank you. It's a lot of work, but well worth the effort, for sure.
I think it's important that you talk a little bit about, and you do on a radio show, about your suicide attempt, because I think it's important for people to know what depth that you were actually at, and talk a little bit about what happened with that.
And especially now that Jill is saying it is well worth the effort to have survived and eventually gone on to thrive.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I didn't have any wall up for that. I certainly felt that I would not attempt suicide. I knew that I wanted to be with my family, but the fact is I'm a very strong, faithful Christian, and I believe that if I just prayed, God would make sure that that didn't happen for me. My prayer was definitely for Him to spare me that trauma. I learned so much that night. I learned that you cannot let your guard down. And although that evening I felt that I couldn't get any worse.
Now, how long was this? Because you'd been in the hospital.
It was a year after the accident.
And you came home after almost dying yourself, multiple injuries, right? Got home, and then?
Yeah, I had an apparatus on my leg, and it had 4 halos and 17 pins.
Wow.
I had that on for 11 months, and I took that off, or I got that off finally, and it was a month after that or a week after that, I can't remember. But it was shortly afterwards that I was in my apartment. At the time, I drank a bottle of wine, and my guard was down. I had to take about 5 or 6 Ambien to sleep 2 or 3 hours at that time in my life. And so when I opened the bottle, the whole bottle came out, all 25, and I remember looking into the mirror and just saying F it. And I took them and put them into my mouth and swallowed, and all 25 went down.
Wow, Jill.
I felt that life couldn't get much worse than that. That the anxiety, the loneliness I felt, the heartache I felt, it couldn't get much worse than that evening. And when I woke after my suicide attempt, I finally wanted to live, and that was the first time in 1 year.
Now talk about how what happened to you though. Didn't you write a suicide note and decide that you left a friend out?
Well, I definitely.
So you called her?
Yeah, I definitely thought that I wouldn't do that, and I still, at that point in time, I was drunk, and I didn't realize, I wasn't sure if I had done that. So I'm looking in the mirror, having a conversation with myself, saying, well, if I did that, then I better line the pills up because I wouldn't want anybody to suffer anymore. Then I went and laid down in my bed, and I remember laying there going, okay, now what? And I'm like, oh, I forgot to write a suicide note. So I got up and I wrote a note, and just wanted everyone to know how much I love them. And I truly felt that I was protecting them in a way, because then no one would have to worry about me anymore, right?
So you were doing the world a favor.
I felt,
right.
Yeah, but I was out of my mind. Yeah. I think that the loneliness you feel, and you feel like such a burden when you're sad. Isn't that, if we could all, as grievers, get over the fact that we're ashamed or we feel bad about being sad, that'd be the one thing I would like for our world to understand, that it's okay to be sad. It's okay to be grieving. That night I didn't feel that way. And so I forgot a friend's name, and I called her and told her that I had been drinking, and that's why I was slurring my words. But she came and found everything next to me and called the hospital immediately.
Wow. Now flash forward now 12 years. What are the major things that have gotten you through this?
It's step by step. In the beginning, I was able to look at about a 15 minutes, half hour maybe ahead of me. I started making lesson plans in the beginning for my days and my week. I couldn't really visualize any more than that. There wasn't anything concrete that I needed to do, so it was things that I could get out of. So I was able to focus on the moment, not on the future, and that gave me control of my moods to a degree. I set aside about 3 hours a day where I would grieve. So I knew at that other time that was my time to watch a movie or read or go for walks or try to keep my mind active and not in the depths of sorrow.
So Jill, let me revisit these because I think they're really important points for everybody. You stayed in the present, and you didn't think about, obsess about the future or the past. You tried to stay in the present. And the other thing that was important is you set aside 3 hours a day and said, this is my time for grieving.
Well, otherwise it takes up your entire day.
Absolutely.
And not that I wasn't sad and I didn't have hard times in the beginning. It was just a way for me to organize. I could, instead of dwelling on that moment, I would tell myself, no, I can worry about this at 4 o'clock today because I'm going to focus more on the loss of my husband or the loss of my children.
Because you had such an out-of-control experience, and you had some control over, okay, this is when I'm going to grieve, and now I'm going to give myself permission to take a break from it.
Right. You have to organize those thoughts, because otherwise it will overtake your life.
Absolutely.
And then you have to educate yourself on what tools will work for you to get healthy again. For me, I did a lot of writing, I guess, before I moved to Italy, and so I continued with that, and that was during those 3 hours. I would do some journaling. I also had
that
a
would
counselor.
be during your grieving hours that you do the journaling. That's interesting, because someone might think, okay, my grieving hours aren't part of my writing, but that was part of your grieving hours.
Part of it is learning how to purge those feelings out of you. So
And
writing
writing
for
does
me,
purge those.
they do. Talking to someone, my counselor was during that time.
So that was part of your grieving time.
Right.
Heidi, I like
this.
that.
I do too.
You know, it's not like I've got to grieve now, I've got to go to my counselor. This is part of my grieving time.
That's part of
Because sometimes
my
people think of
recovery. Yeah.
grieving as just sitting there and crying.
No.
But there's a lot more that goes into grieving, what you're
I
saying.
think what it is trying to figure out a way to get it out from you. That way you're not stuffing it down and pretending life is perfect. So those worked for me. Another thing was journaling through pictures, where I would put a group of pictures together and I would put songs to it. And then another way was to journal through music. And again, one of my favorite CDs is mine. It's Life After Bart, and my first song is From Our First Date, and then the next song is maybe something that we listened to while we were dating, and then our first dance, and up to the time of the accident. So when you listen to that CD, you're listening to the flow of our relationship.
Well, listen, I want to stop now and have Richard Beck come in, and he's an expert on trauma, and he's been listening to you, and I know you've talked to him a little bit, and I wanted to see what Richard thought about all this. Richard, welcome to the show.
Hi, Richard.
Hello, Heidi. Hello, Gloria. It's good to see you.
Great to see you. Great to see you.
Hello, Jill.
Hi.
So I'd like to say something about Richard before we start asking him to respond to Jill's story. Richard has had a big influence on my life professionally because he was my supervisor for 3 years. He taught me a lot about working with trauma on a professional level. Richard he's an adjunct professor at Columbia University, and he's spent thousands of hours working with people that have had traumatic loss. And he is also, let me get this right, Richard, this is the one thing I can't get right here, he chairs the Task Force for Trauma Disaster Management, and he has worked all over the world internationally with people that have had trauma, including those that have been involved in 9/11. So welcome to our show, Richard. So good to have you here.
So Richard, I know you've been listening to Jill. What are some of the things that you're picking up from her as far as trauma? I mean, I'm amazed that she's here she's written a book, and I know we may have time to mention it, but she has remarried since, and she has another child. So, I mean, there's a full cycle story with Jill.
It's overwhelming what you've lived through, survived so much. And your resiliency is so impressive. One thing you mentioned, actually what Heidi and Gloria were talking about in terms of beginning little ways to take control. So important if you've been traumatized, to find a little traction in life, to begin to take some control of something.
That's a hard thing,
That's
right?
very
For people to
difficult.
find that peace.
Yeah, for sure.
The other, you mentioned this very briefly, but shame is so toxic and so prevalent after a traumatic event.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting when she said that people have got to realize that, get over, be able to deal with the shame.
We all share our happiness, but we choose to keep our sadness inside of us. No one wants to hear our sadness, but if we could all just share a little more, then the world would be a happier place, actually.
Yeah. Richard, what do you think the shame is? I mean, I will have to tell you, when my son was killed in an automobile accident, I had a lot of shame because parents take care of their children. And, what was I doing that I wasn't able to take care of my child? I think there's really an overall shame. And you lost 2 children, too, Jill. So do you see that a lot, Richard, that shame?
In women and in men. People kill themselves because of shame. So I'm always listening for it.
So Richard, if somebody has shame and they come to you, what kind of things would you have them do to work through that?
It's a good question.
Talk to you, I imagine, right? And talk about it?
Well, I think that shame can be dissolved with other people. We heal with other people who might understand something which we've lived through. Maybe they've lived through something similar. I believe people heal in groups. Open to Hope is a group, Compassionate Friends is a group, and groups can help people who've experienced horrible losses, people who can just talk about it, that you're not the only one who's lived through this, you don't feel so alone. You can begin to dissolve some of the shame that you have, or maybe help somebody else dissolve the shame that they have.
So it normalizes it to have a group. And I know that you, after 9/11, went actually down by the site and would run groups for years of people that have been down there and affected by that tragedy. And so there was something about being together in the group that was very healing, it sounds like.
I was privileged to work with Aon Corporation for 3 years, from secretaries to senior vice presidents, in group. And people helped each other. They grieved together. I mean, they had hundreds of funerals to go to and choose which one to go to.
Wow.
So,
Yeah.
it's terrible.
Now, what about survival guilt? I mean, Jill must have had that out the kazoo. Wow.
I truly believe that a lot of people have survival guilt. I believe I had it a little bit, but I more or less, I knew where they were. And
That's right.
for me,
So your faith helped you with that?
My faith helped me. I also just wanted to be with them, so I guess I felt guilty about that. I knew my boys were in a safe car seat. I knew everything was as safe as it could be.
Yeah. How about your thoughts on survival guilt?
It's very powerful, and it just doesn't go away overnight. And you just never know who might have it and who might not. There's no way to really tell. I believe people can help each other get through it, more so even than just one-on-one.
I know, Heidi, you talked about survival guilt because the only boy in the family died.
Absolutely. It was really hard after Scott died because I had 3 sisters. He was the only boy. He carried the family name, and he was also kind of the light of our family before he died, and the life of our family as the only boy. And I felt like, wow, the wrong child died. I should have died. And so it was so hard, and it wasn't until I got together with other bereaved siblings in a group setting, and they were saying, I felt guilty, I felt the wrong child died, and I felt the wrong child died, and we all had this shared experience, and I was like, wow, I thought it was just me. I thought something was wrong with me, and I was abnormal.
I'll bet everyone was pretty, I won't curse, I usually curse when I'm working. And I give people gold stars when they curse, when they come to work with me. But the rage in that room must have been
I was going to
palpable.
say, what about the rage and anger?
Palpable.
Yeah.
It's healthy, actually.
Huge.
But it's what you do with it. Some people maladaptively deal with it.
You know, Scott, what was his first name? From the one who...
Craig Scott.
Craig Scott. Craig Scott from Columbine, he beat his little brother up. And he talks about that, how, and this was, you know, like a year after his sister died at Columbine. And he said he finally had to deal with that, you know, because you can hurt other people with that rage.
And so, Richard, you were saying something earlier that rage can be adaptive or it can be healthy. Tell me more about that. Is it getting out those feelings?
Right.
Kind of purging them?
It can, as long as it's not destructive, but it can mobilize someone to do something.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you can just decompose, decompress, and just fall apart.
So it can be energizing.
That's a good phrase.
Yeah.
It can be energizing.
Jill, did you feel like you had a lot of rage, uncontrollable rage?
Of course. I was extremely angry. I feel that we all, when we're going through grief, and if even to this day, 13 years later, if I push down my feelings, I could scream at my current son and feel horrible about the fact that I don't have the same patience I once had in my life. But I have learned that there are ways to get through that rage and to get through that anger. It doesn't mean that it will never come back.
I would also be aware of anniversaries, which stir up feelings. Certain griefs, certain events are more public. We know 9/11, people will have reactions. It was a very public attack, public disaster. We were talking earlier, March 25th, 2004. And you started to almost tear up. So anniversaries really stir up feelings in people, and just their normal reactions to traumatic events, to be aware of them.
Yeah, all the holidays and those big events.
Right by Christmas,
I
right?
prepare right beforehand. I figure out how I'm going to honor that person on that particular day. And that gives me a little control, I guess, a little bit of how I deal with that, how to honor them that day.
So you honor each one separately. Now, do you have
on different ways?
Yeah. Do you have some special thing you do for all 5?
Well, I guess on that, when the day of the accident comes, I I figure out what, for that particular time, what's going to feel right for me. A lot of times I will go to the cemetery. I don't do that very often, but on that particular day I do, and I put flowers and I put little knickknacks on Ben and Sam's stuff
That's really nice.
or whatever. But on holidays and stuff, we always do something in honor of them. Whether Samuel loved horses, so I do a lot with horses. He also loved candy, so sometimes we break out the candy. But
I like that. So Richard, with the clients that you've worked with that have had traumatic losses, what are one or two things people can do out there that have had a traumatic loss and that are not sure if they're going to survive at this point?
Reach out.
Reach out. Okay.
Reach out. Say, I'm not sure what I'm feeling, because you might start feeling crazy.
Yeah.
But those are not crazy feelings. You're not crazy. You've just been traumatized. And those are normal feelings. First thing I tell anybody, these are normal feelings. after a
I love
traumatic
that.
event.
It's so important. So a woman called me after her son had been dead for a year and said, I'm feeling crazy.
That's
And
right.
you know, it was so interesting how, I mean, I just met her at Starbucks and had coffee with her and said, you know what, it's normal.
And she knew to talk to you.
Yeah, and she was like, you know, 6 years later, she sent me a note and said, wow, you know, that was amazing. And I'm like, I didn't do anything but have coffee with you.
She said that saved her life.
Yeah.
She said, I don't
saved her
think I
life.
would be here today if you hadn't told me that what I was going through was normal.
And that's all it took. And so I want to thank you guys today for being on the show and for normalizing. And Jill, and I love your book, Finding Jill. I would definitely say if you know anybody who's been involved with trauma, you definitely ought to get her book. It's fabulous. And thank you again for being on the show, and I want to thank everybody for watching. This Open to Hope show, helping people find hope after loss, and we are in Connect with the Compassionate Friends. What do we call it, Heidi?
We're partnering with Compassionate Friends.
Compassionate Friends, and they are a great organization if you've had a child, a grandchild, or a sibling who's been lost, or died, I mean. I don't want to like say lost always. But we're going to have Paul Alexander on right now, and he's going to sing for us, Light a Candle. And I think that's another wonderful thing you can do if you've had trauma, is to light a candle for them and maybe do it in that time that Jill was talking about, that time slot for grieving. And he's going to sing Light a Candle for us right now. And thank you for watching our show today. And Heidi and I always say, if you've lost hope, lean on ours till you find your own, and God bless.
Today I light a candle for you. The seasons come and go, and I'm weary from the change. I keep on moving on. You know it's not the same. And when I'm walking all alone, do you hear me call your name? Do you hear me sing the songs we used to sing? And I will light a candle for you to shatter all the darkness and bless the times we knew. Like a beacon in the night, the flame will burn bright and guide us on our way. Today I light a candle for you. Oh, you filled my life with wonder. You touched me with surprise. I always saw that something special deep within your eyes. Through the good times, through the bad, we carried on with pride. Oh, I hold on to the love and life we knew, and I will light a candle for you to shatter all the darkness and bless the times we knew. Like a beacon in the night, this flame will burn bright to guide us on our way. Today I light a candle. Oh, today I light a candle for you. For you.